And I suppose this goes to what Jazz is writing about at Hot Air as well. Jazz, thank you, sir, for coming on the program today.
How you doing, buddy?
I am good. So you wrote about what you call one of the worst Washington Post gun control stories ever. It's a pretty high bar, Jazz.
It is a high bar, but if they didn't reach it, I got to tell you, they took a good shot at it.
All right, so the headline here, gun killings fell by 40% after Connecticut passed this law, right?
Absolutely true.
Okay. Now, what's the problem with the story, Jazz?
Well, as I said, that statistic is absolutely true. But if you were to read that statistic in the first few paragraphs, one might be led to believe, and I'm sure they didn't intend it that way, was that you could translate it to say that killings dropped by 40% because of the new gun law.
And we're talking about the permit to purchase law, which, by the way, members of Connecticut's delegation now want to require nationwide.
Right. That's the one, permit to purchase, yes. It's not even one of the worst laws in the country. I mean, I live in New York, so that's easy for me to say because nobody has the worst laws in the country nearly. But, yeah, it was just the statistical model they relied on. They came right out, if you read far enough, and I tried to highlight those facts, that everything they were quoting was completely speculative because you had to know, well, what the murder rate would be if they hadn't passed the law, which is hypothetical. But they got around that by creating an artificial, statistically generated, what they themselves called a Frankenstein of Connecticut, by taking the stats of 3 other states that were not Connecticut and combining them together and going, well, here's what Connecticut would be like without the law. I was like, well, there's some science for you.
Yes, science, weird sciance. Was Kelly LeBrock involved at all?
It is weird science. And the other thing that they kind of gave a quick hat tip to and rushed right past was the fact that, yeah, the rate dropped, but that was the same time that the rate was dropping all across the nation. In fact, it was plunging.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a reason for that, and it wasn't gun control laws because it was happening in all the states that had no gun-grabbing laws being passed. And people were sick of the crime, and they were electing people who were cracking down, even in very blue places like Connecticut and New York. That was when the Broken Windows program started in New York. I went and in a very short period of time found, I only used 2 of them, I found 7 different articles from that 1994-1995 period where the newspapers in Connecticut, in Hartford and the other metropolitan areas, were praising the police and the actions of the governor and the chief of police, the state police department, for really manning up, adding a lot of new people, changing their tactics, getting preventive measures going, stopping drug dealers coming in and out a lot more. I hate to use the phrase before it was popular, stop and frisk. A lot of roadway stops and vehicle searches, finding the people that were trafficking drugs, which was, a massive problem even back then. And they were locking up gang leaders right and left. And the arrest rate had quadrupled during that period. Well, guess what? When you turn the cops free to do their jobs and you go after all the bad guys, the bad guys who have guns no matter whether you have a law against it or not because they don't tend to follow laws like that, the killing rate goes down. So that wasn't really a big shock.
But that doesn't make nearly as good a story if you're trying to push this new gun control law.
No,
I mean, come on,
doesn't.
Jazz, so, and look, I mean, as you point out, they even say these reports offer compelling, if somewhat indirect evidence that permit to purchase laws help save lives. It's a number we can only guess at, but the best estimate seems to be it's a lot saved, Jazz. That's our best estimate.
Yeah, if we go to that metric system that one presidential candidate wants, maybe a lot is a number I'm not familiar with in the old math system. I'll have to look that one up. It was science, buddy. It was science all the way.
Yeah. And what's fascinating to me and really disheartening to me is that the pistol purchase permit system in New Jersey has also been in the news, at least in New Jersey, with the death of Carol Bown. And this is something that, the proponents of this, the Connecticut law and I guess the law in North Carolina that they're fighting to keep in place, They don't talk about the cost here to having a pistol, to having to get approval, to get permission to exercise a constitutional right. And in some cases, yes, waiting on permission to exercise that constitutional right could cost you your life.
Well, that's what happened to Carol. I did read that story, and I'm very, well, we're here on the air. I would just say, my prayers and sympathies to her friends and family. It's pretty awful that somebody knew that there was a dangerous maniac who also paid no attention to gun laws, by the way.
Right.
Who was on her trail, who was a very real and present danger to her. And if she had been able to just go, and I'm not talking about getting a carry permit in New Jersey or conceal, just to have in her home, she might be alive today.
Absolutely.
Who knows?
And the thing is, like, Jazz, it's illegal in New Jersey. If somebody knew Carol Bound and was a gun owner and said, Carol, look, I know you're applying. I know you're just waiting. Here, let me loan you a gun. Let's go to the range so you know how to use it. That's a crime. I mean, that person could go to prison in the state of New Jersey. I personally have issues with that.
Well, we have the same thing in New York. We had that actually before the SAFE Act, but it just got much worse after that.
And I got to ask you, Jazz, now how close are you to where this manhunt is going on for these murderers?
Well, the place they're currently hunting and the prison, I am several hours, I would say 4.5 hours drive from the Clinton Correctional Center. But, and as I wrote about at Hot Air, down here, and I'm friends with the sheriff down here and a lot of the local law enforcement stuff, people are nervous, people are locking their doors because one of those two guys, Sweat, the place where he murdered the sheriff's deputy, which is what he was sentenced for, was literally 16 miles from my house. And the guy has a ton of contacts in the area. Nobody knows where he is. And if he's not heading for Mexico or Canada or Vermont or something, one of the first places that he's going to be heading is here. So everybody's keeping their eyes open.
Have you heard anybody say, I know we've seen a lot of national media reports where people are talking about, yeah, I'm a gun owner and I'm ready to defend my home. Have you had any conversations with people who say they're maybe rethinking their thoughts on gun ownership as a result of this? I haven't personally, but listening to the radio here on the local scene, the conservative talk station, Bob Crew and some of his guys, they've had a number of callers who have said, hey, we live in a nice neighborhood. We generally leave, our doors unlocked half the time. And these are people who said, nope, we're locked and loaded and keeping the doors locked and we're ready. So the people who are armed, because we're up in the more rural area, it's still easier to get through the paperwork, particularly for a long gun. Handguns are still tough. But those who are arming themselves and, keeping an eye out because this is that guy's home turf. Well, listen, I hope that, obviously we all hope that these guys are caught very soon. And in the meantime, hope that everybody does stay safe.
Well, he doesn't want to come to my door, I can tell you that. He'll have an unpleasant surprise waiting.
Jazz, listen, thank you, sir, for coming on the program. It is always a pleasure to talk with you. I do appreciate it.
Anytime, my friend. You have a good day.
All right, you too, sir. Jazz Shaw joining us from Hot Air.